Well, I mean, look, they're accusing me of, quote, pushing in-person learning. Yeah, you're damn right I want kids in-person learning in school. That's how they're supposed to learn in school. The remote learning, Florida, we do better than anyone in remote. I mean, we've had Florida virtual school. We've had a lot of opportunities for people. Other states mimic our curriculum. You know, we're proud of that, but that really serves a very small niche. It's not good enough for what we need on a daily basis. And so our view is, you know, kids need to be in school. It's very, very important. We're certainly better off for having kids in school. I don't think there's any way you could argue that if you look at what's happened in other parts of the country. When they kept the kids out of school, they kept kids out of school in person in some parts of this country for a year and a half. And so you look at that and you're thinking to yourself, man, and it tends to be the kids most negatively affected tend to be, you know, low-income kids or kids with a single mom who has to work, and it really throws their whole family situation for a loop. It doesn't tend to affect as much, you know, a lot of the upper-income families who have the ability to have private schools, have tutors, have some of these other things. And what you saw during this period, you'd actually see politicians locking down public schools, but then sending their own kids in person to private schools. How is that something that could be considered acceptable in any way, shape, or form? And so I'm proud of when we did this in the summer of June of 2020, we're like, kids need to be in school. Oh my gosh, you should have, you know, all the people yelling and in the media and the partisan opponents, all this stuff. The data was very clear on it, so we were always very confident in that. But, you know, we got sued by the union to try to close the schools. We said, no, we won that lawsuit. But if you look at the actual teachers, overwhelmingly, they wanted to come back, even though the union sued us. Many of them are not members of the union anyways, but they sued us. Many of them wanted to come back because they saw firsthand the learning loss that you saw from having remote education, and they knew how important it was. And that was even more important for students that have learning disabilities. I mean, the remote was a total disaster. And so we were able to do that. We had superintendents. I mean, out of the 67 counties, I mean, almost every superintendent wanted to be back in. You know, look, this county's a little different, but most of them really wanted to do it, and it was an important mission for them. And I think we look back on all this over the last couple years, people are going to point and they're going to say, okay, who worked hard to stand by the kids so that they would have opportunities to learn, play sports, do activities, and who basically made the kids bear the brunt of this mitigation, which, oh, by the way, hasn't been effective anyways. And there are a lot of places that chose to impose that on the kids, and I think that's wrong. Yes, ma'am.
A lot of Floridians have expressed concerns about affordable housing across the state. Just last week, his campaign trail, Charlie Crist had cutting the DeSantis fund in half. Is there a comment you would like to make regarding that and your plan?
Well, so if you look at my governor's budget, we fully funded the Sadowski, but I would say that when you have inflation the way you're doing it because of policies that people like the congressman have supported with Biden, you know, joined at the hip, that is causing everything to be much more expensive. And so if you're going to build an apartment complex that would be maybe multifamily, the cost of that is now up 30%. And so that's going to cost more on the back end for people. You also look at what the Biden administration did with CDC by having this moratorium where where a lot of the people who own these places couldn't get access to rent. So what they're now doing to counteract that, they're actually raising rents higher than they may have been before. So you have a lot of bad policies at play, you know, that are ending up doing it. But I can tell you, you know, we fully funded that in our governor's budget. You know, we'll see what the legislature ends up doing, but you can't be supporting these inflationary policies on the one hand and then turn around and act like something because that's what's driving, you know, a lot of what you see. Look, when it comes to housing in Florida, there's a big demand. People want to be in Florida. We lead the country in net in-migration since COVID-19 hit. And the reason for that is because people are attracted to live in a free state. They're attracted to live in a state where there's opportunities. There's a lot of different industries that are able to thrive here where they wouldn't even have been able to operate in most of these other states for a long time. I mean, you look at what's happening in our service industries, our restaurants, all that stuff has been very, very good. But the demand is very, very intense when you have people that are voting with their feet. Yes, they're leaving for lower taxes, some, but they're leaving COVID lockdowns and restrictions and mandates. They're leaving high crime areas, which we've seen, unfortunately, just devastate so many communities across the country, because these are people that indulged in this idea that you should attack law enforcement, you should defund or cut funding for law enforcement, that you'd have prosecutors that wouldn't prosecute cases, that you'd get rid of cash bail. All these really bad policies have resulted in the biggest crime surge we've seen in this country in decades. So there's a whole host of factors, that's driving demand up, and in terms of being in Florida. I always say, I'm not going around the country begging for people to come, because we have a great state, we've got great people, but it's a free country, and I can't prevent folks if they want to come. But I do think you're going to continue to see a demand for people to be in Florida, because we've really been, we've really stood as kind of the beachhead of freedom in this country, especially with all the nonsense that's been going around. I mean, I think from, we talked about the schools, obviously keeping businesses open, fighting against the federal mandates and private mandates, fighting restrictions, particularly when local governments tried to do it. We've really been on the forefront of a lot of that, and people respond positively. But this inflation is a huge, huge problem. And if you remember in the summer, I've been talking about it for a long time. In the summer, the White House said this was transitory, that no serious person thought that there was going to be inflation, and that was not consistent with the facts. And so now we know that this is something that's really serious. Again, much higher than 6 or 7%. If you look at what the average person has to purchase, I think it's going much higher. So this is creating huge problems all across the economy. Now, we're stepping up in Florida to say, okay, gas prices are through the roof. Let's do $1 billion gas tax holiday so that we can provide relief for Floridians. We're working with the legislature on doing that. We also said, let's step up with our ports and let's get some of these ships that are stranded in different parts of the world. Let's get them to come to Florida so that we can get these goods to market, which will also help reduce the inflationary pressures. And I can actually report, I was just down in Port Everglades. Since we made that push, they're up 15%. In the cargo that's coming in to Port Everglades down in South Florida. You look at Jacksport in Northeast Florida, they immediately, upon us announcing, were able to redirect ships from places like Savannah coming in. So we have had an impact. I think we'll be able to do more as things go, but we have been proactive at doing what we can at the state level to fight back against the inflation, which is really the #1 problem that we face economically. Okay, everyone, thanks so much. Appreciate it.